Now, the City of Cape Town has now published its draft Integrated Human Settlement Strategic Plan. If I may put that into normal language, the policy it will follow over the next few years to manage where people live. It's been a huge issue in Cape Town. There's been a large number of people who've moved into that area and set up shacks. Sometimes the city has tried to remove those dwellings. That's led to very difficult confrontations. Overriding all of this, of course, is where else can people live? Michael Clark's Researcher and Advocacy Officer at Ndifuna Ukwazi, an organisation which represents these people. Michael, good afternoon to you. This policy will obviously affect you, the people that you represent. You're worried about this draft policy. What are you worried about?
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen. There are a couple of big concerns with the policy. The first is a massive shift in relation to the main form in which the state provides housing. Usually it provides housing in terms of its BNG program, its Breaking New Ground program. And in terms of that program, it's actually shifting a lot from developing houses, which are top structures, to just developing service sites. Now, these are sites that obviously are a plot of land that have access to electricity, access to water, but don't actually have a top structure. And the city is moving towards a space where it is reserving top structures predominantly for people who are elderly, who are disabled, and who are child-headed households. Everyone else largely will get a service stand. On the one hand, this is positive. It means that the government can roll out many more service stands than it could possibly do otherwise. But on the other hand, there are some serious challenges here as well. People who have been on the housing waiting list for years, potentially even decades, might simply not get a house. And that's maybe something that is completely different to what the expectations have been up until now.
Sorry, Michael, if I can just follow up on that. I mean, it's a very interesting issue, this, but isn't the City of Cape Town actually following national policy? Certainly in Gauteng, that's also becoming the policy, that people would not get a house, people would get a service stand. I mean, you're absolutely correct. People who are not able-bodied, people who are child-headed households, elderly, etc., will get a house, but this is becoming national policy, not just the City of Cape Town.
That's correct to a certain extent. It gets a little bit more complicated than that, though, Stephen, because what's happened is that the national government has issued a directive. Now, a directive is not policy itself, and policy actually hasn't been altered at all. And so this actually raises some serious questions. If this is a new policy, why has the government not changed the policy, and why has it not allowed people to participate in the policy-making process as it is supposed to and obliged to do? And that raises other concerns. So it's actually kind of doing this a little bit through the back door, and basically leaving municipalities to largely have to confront this issue and this change themselves, which is deeply concerning.
I mean, I think you must be right, particularly around the expectations that now will be dashed. That will lead to trouble, especially for people who've been on waiting lists. I think you must also be right that people have been on waiting lists for decades. The question that a city and a country and a province has, the problem that they have to resolve is how to help the greatest number of people. Now, I mean, you already alluded to that. Isn't a service stand for people who say under the age of 40 the right thing to do? Because that will allow government to help the largest number of people. To put it another way, I'm sure you will agree, there's simply no way that our government has the resources to build enough houses for everybody who needs one.
No, of course, and that's not necessarily what we're saying. What we are saying, though, is that we're deeply concerned that this follow-through in a shift towards service stands hasn't been followed through with an increase in funding for specific government programs that allow people to build their own homes. So programs like the Enhanced People's Participation Housing Process, Enhanced People's Housing Process, are specifically formulated and created for this exact purpose, to help people construct their own homes, to give them the services, the skills, the capacity that they need to be able to do that. And we're not seeing a follow-through from government and from the city in capacitating or adding capacity to those programs. So what we're going to end up having is people who are given a service stand and largely are going to have to spend years potentially having to save up money before they can actually start building. And that's going to lead to greater informalization, something that the city itself alludes to in its criticism of the national government's approach to FLIS.
Cape Town's interesting in many ways because what you have is a microcosm of problems that cities have around the world, but particularly in South Africa, where you have people moving from certain areas into the city. Now, I say specifically in South Africa because it's the most unequal country in the world. Of course, there's a massive racial dimension to that. It is but the very definition of racialized inequality. So what ways, what measures can a city like Cape Town, other cities, Joburg, eThekwini as well, Tshwane, what can they follow to try and manage this in a better way? And let me just sort of say that, again, in any country in the world, the rich will do almost everything they can to try and keep the poor out. Michael, I don't need to tell you that.
No, exactly. Yes. So, Stephen, I think the answer's relatively simple, although it seems to be very hard for government to actually act on this. The most important thing is build really well-located housing in really well-located areas. So we need housing close to jobs, close to social amenities. We need the state to specifically take the land that it has and that it has available. We know, for example, from the city's own documents, the city has 87,000 pieces of public land that it has available. And we're not saying all of that is suitable for housing, but some of it certainly must be suitable. And we're not seeing the city come to the table. Another problem with the plan is the city's inability to have actioned the social housing projects that it's committed to since 2017. That's almost 5 years ago now. And we still see these programs in the planning phases. If we're serious about addressing inequality and we're serious about saying we need to actually give people dignified homes, especially in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, where so many more people were driven into homelessness as a result of unemployment and a lack of income, then we really need to come to the table, and we can't be spending 5 years at a time planning and then not identifying more sites in those periods of time. The city has to roll out housing at scale and urgently.
Michael Clark, thank you. Researcher Advocacy Officer at the organization Ndifuna Ukwazi.